6,000. 6,000.
How do you come up with that figure? How do you come up with that?
How come with that? It's in Genesis. There was no prehistoric times. You know, we hear about prehistoric and the caveman and all that, right? And where did the caveman come from? Monkeys? Apes? And evolved? That's a theory. That's Darwin's theory, which means there's no truth behind it.
Right.
Two creations, they say. Remember we looked at that yesterday? Let's look at it again. The first creation, they say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Stop right there. So that's the first creation. And there were other people that lived before Adam and Eve. Evolution. And then they say the second creation, now the earth was formed and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was over it. They say that's the second creation. Not so. One creation. God created everything, and He did it in 6 days. That's an awesome God. I'm going to show you this video, and they'll probably hit on a little bit more than what I did.
Been a kind of poster child of evolution for decades. According to the general theory of evolution, no human being ever saw a living dinosaur. Evolutionists insist that dinosaurs became extinct more than 60 million years ago, while humans allegedly evolved about 57 million years later. According to the Bible, however, God made everything in 6 days. But how could this have included dinosaurs? The Bible doesn't even mention dinosaurs, does it? And even if it did, how could mere humans have ever lived with such creatures? Admittedly, a person will not find the word dinosaur in most English translations of the Bible. But we must keep in mind that the Bible is not a taxonomic book. Its main purpose is to tell us about God and His scheme of redemption, not to list every animal God created. The Bible mentions a variety of animals, but not every animal. I don't think the Bible ever specifically mentions cats, kangaroos, elephants, aardvarks, anteaters, platypuses, and penguins. To say that these animals don't cohabit the earth with man because the Bible doesn't mention them would, of course, be absurd. For Christians to assume dinosaurs and humans never lived together because the Bible doesn't mention dinosaurs is equally erroneous. We must also recognize that whereas the Bible was completed 1900 years ago and was translated fully into English by 1535, the English word dinosaur was not coined until 1842, more than 300 years after the first complete English translation of the Old and New Testaments. Obviously, one would not expect to find the English term dinosaur in a translation of the Bible that preceded its coinage. What's more, though most modern English Bible translators have elected to omit the term dinosaur, such exclusion doesn't necessarily mean that the Bible writers refrain from mentioning dinosaurs or dinosaur-like creatures. Consider the great sea creatures that were created on day 5 of creation. Could this not have included dinosaur-like water-living reptiles such as plesiosaurs? Also of interest is the fact that the Bible gives God's description of two massive creatures in Job chapters 40 and 41, Behemoth and Leviathan, which sound very much like a dinosaur and a dinosaur-like water-living reptile. But regardless of whether dinosaurs are mentioned specifically in the Bible or not, one can know that they were created alongside man during the creation week and not millions of years earlier. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Still, because most people, even many Christians, have been conditioned to believe that no human being could have ever lived with dinosaurs, they dismiss the thought, and along with it, a literal and logical interpretation of the Genesis account of creation. In fact, a few years ago, one Christian author wrote a children's book claiming that man could not have lived in a world full of dinosaurs. So by the time God created Adam, the dinosaurs were gone. He later wrote that it is ludicrous to suggest that man cohabited with the dinosaurs. Many people seem to think that dinosaurs would have killed all of the humans by biting them in half with their supersized teeth, or by hunting them down and cutting them open with their 5-inch long sickle-like claws. People think that the large plant eaters would have crushed humans with their massive feet and smashed them with their huge tails. Truly, some dinosaurs, such as Apatosaurus and Brachiosaurus, were extremely large. Others were smaller but with sharp teeth and long claws. People generally think of these animals as being ferocious and virtually invincible. So just how is it that creationists can reasonably believe that humans could have survived on this earth alongside dinosaurs in the distant past? The truth is, humans have always lived on earth with amazing, incredible creatures, and we still do. Do you ever stop to consider what kind of mighty animals we currently live with on earth? Elephants, for example, are the largest land-living animals in the world. Some reach weights of up to 22,000 pounds and could easily kill a man just by stepping on it, or by striking him with its 6-foot-long, 300-pound trunk. Yet, for thousands of years, humans have been known to live with and tame these creatures. Over 2,200 years ago, the Empire of Carthage used tamed African elephants, the largest elephants in the world, to battle the Romans. Today, many elephants are still being controlled by man. Tamed elephants are used in various Asian countries to perform in religious ceremonies or to do physical labor like hauling lumber or transporting people from place to place. In other countries, tamed elephants have been used in all sorts of performances to entertain people. Humans have been able to live alongside elephants for thousands of years. So why is it so hard for people to think of humans living on the same planet as the large dinosaurs? Yes, some dinosaurs, like Brachiosaurus, grew to be about 4 times larger than the largest elephants. But if man can work, play, and go to battle alongside or on top of elephants, the largest land animals on Earth today, it surely is not absurd to think humans did similar things with certain dinosaurs. Especially when you consider that, according to evolutionary paleontologists, the average dinosaur was only about the size of a large cow. Whales are the largest animals ever known to have existed on Earth, larger than any elephant or dinosaur. Blue whales have been known to weigh as much as 400,000 pounds. Yet humans have hunted many species of whales for centuries. Some people today ride in small boats and even swim next to some of these massive creatures as they photograph them. Killer whales are another one of God's magnificent creatures with which we live on this earth. They are one of the ocean's fiercest predators and are able to kill much larger whales when swimming in packs. Killer whales hunt so well that very few animals can escape from them. In addition to eating fish, they eat thousands of pounds of mammal meat every year, including seals, sea lions, and walruses. Amazingly, these large killing machines, weighing more than 8,000 pounds, can be captured, tamed, and trained to do all sorts of things. Some of the famous orcas that have lived in captivity occasionally took their trainers for rides on their backs. Let that sink in. Doesn't that sound kind of cartoonish on the surface? Human beings riding on the backs of killer whales? I wonder what our ancestors would think. Trainers of killer whales have even been known to stick their heads inside the whales' mouths without getting bit. Have you seen what's in the mouths of these animals? Dozens of large 3 to 4 inch long, scary looking teeth. How can a 150-pound man teach an 8,000-pound whale how to jump over hurdles, ring bells, and perform other neat tricks without being harmed? The answer is found, at least partly, in Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." The reason man can tame even some of the largest and most vicious creatures on earth is because God created man higher than animals and gave him the ability to subdue them and have dominion over them. Man, unlike any other creature on earth, is made in the image of God. James wrote, "For every kind of beast and bird, a reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind." If man can live on the same planet with the blue whale and even tame such amazing creatures as the elephant and the killer whale, as well as lions, tigers, and bears, it shouldn't be difficult for Bible believers to accept the biblical teaching that all land animals, including dinosaurs, were made on day 6 of creation along with Adam and Eve. Dinosaurs aren't a problem for God or His Word. Dinosaurs logically fit within the biblical timeline, just as all other animals do, whether we're talking about the saber-toothed tiger, the woolly mammoth, or the dodo bird. If you would like more information on this subject, especially about the physical and historical evidence for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans, pick up a copy of our 230-page book, The Dinosaur Delusion, Dismantling Evolution's Most Cherished Icon, available from Apologetics Press. Also, be sure to visit us at apologetixpress.org. For
Okay, if you would go to Ken Ham's website, his answers in Genesis, there's a myriad of information on creation. Okay. Yesterday, first of all, are there any questions on the video? Pretty self-explanatory. Isn't it? So you have to be careful about that Carter dating. And that's how they came up with the millions of years. And they have proved that. Scientists have now proved that to be wrong. You have the secular scientists and the Christian scientists. The secular scientists are now becoming more believing the Christian scientists and looking at what the Bible says. Remember, I told you how powerful God is. He's self-existent, and He stopped the space shuttle from going up. Remember the story I told you about that? Did you all hear it? What happened was the space shuttle at that time, a multi-million-dollar machine, and it was getting ready to thrust off into space. And the countdown went, I go to 5, 4, 3, abort mission, abort mission. this machine weighed several tons. It couldn't take off. You know why? A woodpecker. A woodpecker was on it. And it would have threw it off. A bird that probably weighed, what, 3 ounces? 4 ounces? That's how powerful God is.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now, we had also talked about all the animals on the earth today. That some of the animals that are on earth today were not on the ark. And then we wonder, how did they get here? Well, first of all, how did they get on the ark? And how did they fit on the ark? We just saw pictures, diagrams of these huge dinosaurs weighing tons, of thousands of pounds. How did they fit on the ark? The ark is about 3 stories. Big as an ocean liner. And all those animals fit on the ark. And God summoned them. And they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "We don't know." God said, "Go." So they went, 2 by 2, male and female. And then the only thing they had on the ark was vegetation. You know, you saw the T-Rex. T-Rex did not eat men. T-Rex ate vegetables, greenery. And so when Noah got them all on the ark, they didn't have to worry about ribs, barbecue, chicken. They had chicken, but they didn't eat them. They ate the vegetables. They ate the same thing the animals ate. So everything was a vegetarian. Everything was a vegetarian until you get to the book of Leviticus. And then in Leviticus it says that God says, you no longer have to eat vegetarian, be a vegetarian, but now you can eat meat. But then he gave the law on what meat you could eat and what meat you couldn't eat. But then when Jesus came, he put all that stuff aside. He says, whatever my Father has made eat, I'm paraphrasing, eat it. So that's why we eat chitlins today, right? Okay. Some of us. Okay. So how did he fit them all on the ark? This is how he did it. They were small animals. They were like teenagers. And they had different compartments for all of them. If you go to the website and look at Genesis, back to Genesis, and you look at the ark where Ken Ham has recreated the ark from the dimensions of the Bible. And he's done an outstanding job. So they were small animals that fit in the ark. Now, when the ark landed, how many days did they? How many days was the ark afloat?
40 days and 40 nights.
Okay, it was longer than that. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. But then they had to wait for the water to subside, right? And it landed on Mount Ararat. Okay, now it's something in God's creation, even about this ark. And the precursor to the ark was something else that happened in the book of Exodus. A little baby was put into a basket. You know who that baby was? So the baby was Moses. Okay, now, how did they make that basket? It was made out of reed. Okay, there was reed. Okay, if you go to that museum in Chicago, what's that museum? I can't think of it. Not Science and Industry.
The Museum of, not the Science and Industry?
No. Somebody Google that.
There's several.
Huh?
There's several museums.
Man, I can't think of, anyway, they have it in there, and they use reed. But when they used the reed, it was like a plant. They put
Pitch.
pitch. Okay, so what is pitch? What was the pitch? It's like a tar. Okay, so it's a tar-like substance, and the tar-like substance was inside and outside, and it floated, and Moses was in it. So he was in the ark of safety. That's a precursor to Jesus Christ. A precursor to Christ. But I'll go back to the ark. Because the ark, when you read about the ark being made, it was made out of acacia wood or acacia wood. Acacia wood was a wood that didn't rot. It was a strong wood. So God said, put pitch in and pitch outside of the ark. Now, that word pitch, the Hebrew, you know what it has the idea of? Atonement. Atonement. So Christ is the atonement. He's the ark of safety. It's a precursory. What God did with Noah and the ark, specifically the ark, is a precursor of Jesus Christ. And then it came again in the book of Exodus, how a baby was saved. So in the ark, animals were saved, and how many people were saved? Noah, his wife, and his two sons and their wives. So you had 8 people, right? Do your back. Right? Noah, Sue, his wife, okay, his son's wife,
Did he have 2 sons or 3?
2 sons,
2 sons, so that would be 6.
but the 3. Shem, Ham, and Jacob. 3.
3.
Okay, 3 sons. So you have those people that were saved.
8.
How many?
8.
Okay, so there were 8 people that were saved in the ark. 1 baby was saved in the ark. And Jesus Christ is the ark of safety, and we're saved. So you see how things work? Yes, question.
Is there still such a thing as acacia wood?
There is known some acacia wood, and I think it's in a cathedral in Turkey where they made these huge doors into the temple. That's the only thing that I know that has that type of wood today. Now there's something like it because on my porch I have a bench that says it's made of acacia wood. So it stays outside all the time. It's not supposed to, right. Okay, so those things happen. Now I want to show you a video of the ark. See, we're not only just dealing with dinosaurs, we're dealing with God's great creation. So now let's look and see how this ark was built.
Hey, Dr. Smith, that Field Museum? Field Museum? That's the one you're talking about?
Huh?
Field Museum?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. The Field Museum. That's it, right. And they showed it on the video with that T-Rex.
Dinosaurs and all kinds of
Right.
mummies.
If you ever have a chance to go to Chicago, you have to go. It's imperative that you go. Because what I like about it is that when you go into that museum, there's the baby section, life itself. And they got permission from parents that who stillborn or they lost the baby, you know, in early on, and they took those fetuses and put them in those, what is formaldehyde, I think it is. Yeah, and from the time of inception all the way up into the time where the baby is born, and they're in jars. Each stage of life is in there. I don't know. Do they? Okay, check it out. Okay, let's watch this video.
face of the waters. Then God said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness.
He came into the world just as every other baby had, born to an anxious and anticipating family, born into a world that would be filled with struggles. He was nurtured by his mother, cared for by his father, and considered as a source of joy and hope. His father Lamech called his name Noah, saying, he will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands. In any life story or biography, the major events, accomplishments, and struggles are the focus. And from these accounts, we learn about a person's character and their perseverance. Yet from even the everyday details or passing references, we can learn much about a person's attitude, personality, and influence. For Noah, it was the wickedness of the world in his generation that would define the attitudes and actions of his life. The earth was corrupt before God, was filled with violence. As a result of this environment, a call to action came to Noah at the apex of his life, and it came directly from God. Make yourself an ark. This is a short directive. May seem simple, but it would consume Noah's time and energy as he moved with godly fear to prepare an ark for the saving of his family. But this isn't where the story really begins, nor is even Noah's birth a proper place to start. First, we have to consider how the world had fallen into such awful conditions. The entrance of sin into the world by Adam and Eve was both regretted and remembered by the first couple. The Garden of Eden was a place of lush existence. It abounded with every tree that was pleasing to the sight and good for food. But having sinned against God, both husband and wife were sent out from the garden. They would continue their life facing the toils and struggles that had previously been unknown to them. One of the many reminders of their sin was the pain Eve would experience in childbirth. As God had pronounced, in pain you shall bring forth children. Through the pain, Eve would safely bring two sons into the world, Cain and Abel. Now the struggle of parenting would begin and bring with it new challenges. Cain, the firstborn, would grow to be a farmer, bringing forth harvests from the earth. Abel, his younger brother, would grow to become a shepherd and a keeper of flocks. While we're not told how old the two sons were, at some age of accountability, each son brought his offering in worship to God. Abel's offering of the firstborn of his flock was pleasing and respected by God. Cain's offering, though, was not in obedience to God's will, and God did not respect him. Cain's response was to become very angry and jealous. God placed before Cain encouragement to choose the good path. God told him plainly, "If you do well, will you not be accepted?" But rearing its ugly head, sin offered its evil temptations to mankind. And we see the young farmer Cain choose to maintain his attitude of jealousy and rage toward his younger brother. Then, willfully acting on these sinful desires, Cain rose up and killed Abel, committing the world's first murder. For this evil deed, Cain was banished, driven by the Lord away from his family to live as a fugitive and a wanderer. Adam and Eve were now left without sons, one murdered and the other living with the consequences of his choices. So Adam and Eve did what was necessary to continue with their lives, having faith in God's loving care and plan. In time, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, including their third son, Seth, who God had appointed as another seed in Abel's stead. Through Seth's life and lineage, the rapidly growing family of mankind began to call on the name of the Lord. Seth's godly example can be seen extending to the seventh generation from Adam, where we find the patriarch Enoch, who has been renowned in history as having faithfully walked with God. His righteous life so impressed the Creator that God ushered him from the earth without having to endure death. In the years that each of these generations were establishing their families, becoming parents to many sons and daughters, becoming uncles and aunts, grandparents, and even great-grandparents, there was another major branch of Adam and Eve's lineage that contained a growing population of people doing much of the same day-to-day living. While we often focus on the descendants of Seth as being sons of God, the lineage of Cain also provides a wealth of clues, both obvious and subtle, for understanding the cultural setting into which Noah would be born. Cain was not subjected to the penalty of death for having taken Abel's life. Rather, even in his banishment, God set a mark on him to warn off any in the future that might bring him home. Therefore, Cain continued a protected life, but one that was subjected to daily struggles of survival. Cain settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden, where he lived and toiled. His struggling extended even to his own occupation of farming, where God had pronounced that his labors would no longer yield its strength to him. Over time, though, Cain would eventually marry a descendant of Eve and bear a son. As their family continued, Cain built a city and named it Enoch after his firstborn son. Cain's lineage multiplied throughout many generations of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The generations of Cain's lineage proved industrious. In the seventh generation of Cain, 3 men are noted for their abilities for work and ingenuity. Jabal was a father of all those who lived nomadically in tents and maintained herds of livestock. His brother Jubal was noted for his creative abilities, being described as the father of all those who played the harp and the flute. A third brother, Tubal-Cain, was industrious in the production of bronze and iron implements, and even the training of skilled craftsmen. These families and subsequent cultures might have been praised for their additions of knowledge and skills to humanity, if it were not for the content of their character. Immorality, wickedness, rebellion, and violence were also passed through this lineage. It seems Cain, the patriarch of these many peoples, did not instill an understanding of the importance of obedience and righteousness. Though the consequences of sin followed him, a legacy of remembrance was not passed on. Rather, It was one of vengeance and wickedness. These two main lineages, that of Seth and that of Cain, encompassed a vast group of developing peoples. Originally, each began with very different value systems. Cain's descendants multiplied and demonstrated rebelliousness toward their heavenly Father. Seth and his lineage embodied the values of respect and faith toward their Creator. However, over time, the pure hearts and minds of the faithful were weakened. Husbands and wives were chosen without any regard to the questions of their character, their faithfulness, their righteousness. The righteous sons of God in Seth's lineage were marrying the worldly descendants of Cain, whose focus was on raising daughters of men instead of daughters to God. These marriages broke the convictions of the faithful populations. This transition from families of faithfulness to families consumed by worldly desires was not immediate, but rather it festered within humanity, growing and spreading from generation to generation. There had been many faithful families in humanity's past, but with so many later generations compromising on their principles, the few men and women who had been faithful, they relinquished their positive influences on their children and their grandchildren, their friends and their relatives. The very foundation of God was now abandoned. Even the everyday relationships and interactions deteriorated into deceptions and thievery, maliciousness and violence. It consumed humanity until every intent of the thoughts of their hearts were only evil continually. Years after the faithfulness of Enoch had been rewarded, his great-grandson Noah was born into this struggling and morally unraveling world. Guided by his mother and his father, Noah grew up, facing all the same temptations that every other young man his age was experiencing. It's reasonable to consider that Noah had every opportunity to choose a life of corruption, violence, of selfishness, personal gain, or rebellion. The opportunities were even more multiplied when we consider that at this time in history, men and women lived much longer lives, even centuries. Noah's grandfather, Methuselah, holds the distinction of being the oldest recorded man to have ever lived at 969 years. Yet despite the enormous temptations of a corrupt and pleasure-seeking world, Noah chose the straight way in obedience to God. Was Noah sinless in his actions or choices? By no means. As every man that had ever lived, Noah also sinned and fell short of God's glory. But was Noah able to stand before any man, any judge, any court, and in the face of his accusers, be without blame and above reproach? Absolutely. Noah was a man of integrity, who was fair and just in his dealings with anyone. The overall character of Noah's life is recorded and described as one who walked with God. However, God, when looking down on the rest of the earth, was appalled at what he saw, disgusted with the abuse of the free will he had so lovingly granted to his creation. Inspired history records a welling up of regret that the faithful Creator felt for the direction his creation had chosen in their lives. In his justice, God proclaimed a verdict of guilt upon all those who had disobeyed his teachings.
And God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth."
Such a sentence of totality could only be made by the one who was responsible for it all. Would God continue to see sinful man ravage each other and degrade humanity's value? God's answer was issued.
And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die.
The punishment for mankind's wickedness would simply be water, falling from the sky, springing from the ground. But it would be far greater than a spring shower. Instead, it would take the world by storm, literally, cover it completely, and prevail across the globe totally. God was going to plunge the world into a worldwide flood. But with his justice, God's mercy would also be extended to Noah and the few righteous souls whose attitude and conviction for goodness, kindness, and righteousness had found grace in the eyes of the Lord. God conveyed to Noah the details of the sentence that he would enact upon the earth. But with it, he also made an offer for protection. God said, "I will establish my covenant with you." This covenant offered by God was one of protection and salvation from the judgment that the world deserved. But it would also place an immense responsibility on Noah. In understanding the timeline of Noah's life, it seems that this covenant with God came near the time that Noah and his wife were establishing their family, about the age of 500. Men and women of Noah's day lived very long lives, but in comparison with previous generations, Noah was a fair bit older than others. A fair bit older when his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth were born. Perhaps this age provided Noah with greater wisdom to fulfill what God would be requiring of him. Being offered protection was merciful, but how was it that Noah could avoid such a natural, all-encompassing, catastrophic flood? The flood's pronouncement was upon all flesh under heaven. There were no mountaintops to scale that would be unaffected, no distant lands to retreat to. As always, though, God's plans were not lacking. His covenant with Noah was complete, addressing both his actions and provisions, as well as what would be Noah's required duty, the making of an ark. Making an ark. It may have seemed like a simple enough task to Noah, but then again, what's an ark? In a literal sense, he understood the word to be a chest, a box, or a barge. But in terms of a flood, a vessel for saving his family, Noah had never heard of, seen, or even been inside such a thing, let alone constructed one. For that matter, Noah had never seen any catastrophic flood of water, especially comprehending enough water that could consume the lands of the entire world. But of course, God's covenant was complete, and he never left his people without proper instruction or guidance. When he made commands for his people, he always communicated to them in ways they could be properly understood. He provided resources where they could be properly obeyed. What was this barge, this box, this ark to be like? How large was it to be? What was its interior to be like? Noah was not a seasoned shipbuilder. There are no indications that he was revered for his construction or design abilities. Yet God knew Noah's strengths and weaknesses, his areas of knowledge and ignorance. So all of the necessary details were supplied to Noah as part of the covenant God was establishing with him. For its structure, the ark was to be made of wood, and lots of it. The amount of wood needed would boggle the mind, because God's plans for the overall size and proportions of the ark specified that it must be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits tall. Pitch would be used to coat the entire outside and inside of this massive structure, creating a very important waterproof barrier. Provision for light was provided, and a single door was partitioned in its side. Within the ark, God called for structural divisions that would make it useful and effective for its task. 3 major decks would divide its height and provide an immense amount of usable floor space. Noah was to add many rooms or compartments, creating a means of orderliness and organization for the ark's passengers and its cargo. So far, God had detailed an enormous vessel. But what was going to fill all of this space? The few individuals that would be on board would scarcely need a fraction of the spacious accommodations. For God, the flood would serve as a major act of renewal. But he was not performing a recreation. The ark's immense accommodations would also be for the preservation of animal life through the representatives of the animal kinds that would be affected by a global flood. Animals which lived on land and had the breath of life in them. Beasts and cattle, creeping things, birds of every kind. The final cargo would be the provisions needed for both man and animal to survive. God had provided the details necessary for Noah. And it says, thus Noah did, according to all that God had commanded him. During what would be many, many years of preparation, there was much more that involved Noah's time and energy than just the ark's construction. Noah was a father to 3 sons who were of such a faithful character that God included them to be part of the chosen few who would board the ark. Was Shem, Ham, and Japheth faithful, honest, and righteous because of the world's influence? Not at all. They were righteous and upstanding men due to the diligent and thoughtful parenting of Noah and his wife. A stark contrast to children being raised by the world. As parents, Mr. and Mrs. Noah had to provide for the daily and physical well-being of their sons, food, clothing, shelter, caring for them when they were sick and bandaging them when they were hurt. They also were highly involved and concerned with their sons' spiritual growth and well-being. By necessity, this training would have included all of the essentials about obedience to God, teaching their sons about the Creator, about respect for authority, about the great importance of worship, maintaining an attitude of humility, and much, much more. Yet we know that the teaching by these parents was effective and that the sons received it well. Through the years, the family of Noah experienced all of the usual major life experiences that modern people are familiar with. There were the aging of parents and grandparents and other family. There were undoubtedly various relatives, extended family, or neighbors who died. And these events would have evoked times of grief and sorrow. At the other extreme, there were the weddings. 3 sons growing through adolescence to be young men, who inevitably would find young ladies to be their wives. Little is known of these young women, but what is known is that they too were given a place in the ark. They were not subjected to the sentence of punishment as the world was. The implication here is that the godly influences of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the father-in-law Noah, and potentially the largest factor, their new mother-in-law, Mrs. Noah, was of such impact, so life-changing, that these young women left behind their old lives, and most likely the sinfulness of their immediate families, in order to render their lives in obedience to God. Had Noah, described as a preacher of righteousness, had he seen positive fruit from his holding fast to godliness? Well, in these 3 young couples, Mr. and Mrs. Noah saw a future of hope. Now the family was growing. More hands at work was encouraging, but the hardships were not lessening. The ark still had to be built and finished, the provisions gathered, and the opportunities to continue preaching to a lost world could not be overlooked. Noah sought to warn his generation of the coming events, not knowing when the time would be fulfilled and God's long suffering would be ending. God had said that he would not strive with man forever. When would the ark be fully prepared? When would the staging of animals be complete? Noah was not in charge of the timing. Every day for approximately 100 years, Noah and his family woke up, at times with soreness or stiffness or aches from a previous hard day's work. They had before them a choice. Would they choose to obey God and continue in their efforts? Or would they decide to forget the whole endeavor altogether? Day after day, month after month, year after year, these 8 men and women made the decision that it was crucial for them to follow God's will. Along the way, the family did have
Okay, I want to stop that right there. I want to go back and ask some questions. And the reason why I'm showing this because I couldn't find my notes. I'll hit them on tomorrow night. I don't know what happened to it. I had it all together on my file, but I lost this real film. Anyway, okay, so you had all the animals go into the ark, 2 by 2. And the ark for 40 days and for 40 nights. And after 120 days, then the water finally ceases. So Noah, what? First of all, throws out a raven, I think it is. Then he throws out a dove. Okay, the dove comes back and he throws the dove out again. The dove comes back with a olive branch in its beak, which let him know that there's ground now. So God closed the ark, and then God is the one that can open the ark. Now my question becomes, if the dinosaurs were saved, and they were young, and I'm pretty sure they had other dinosaurs and their kind, what happened to them? How did they die? Any clue? And then with the flood, with the flood, remember I shared with you, somebody else had to die before the flood came. You remember his name? The oldest man that ever lived, Methuselah. And how many years did he live? 969 years. Okay, so then you go to the book of Enoch, and you read the account of what Enoch says, that the flood came when Enoch died. Enoch was the last righteous man besides Noah and his family. Do you remember what his name means? Methuselah, his name means? What?
I'm thinking he was saying he would not see death until this happened or something like that. That's not right.
So if you would look in the Greek lexicon, a lexicon is just a fancy word for the dictionary. So if you look at the Greek and the Hebrew lexicon, and it says about Methuselah, you know it says the oldest man that ever lived. So how would we actually find out the meaning of his name? I'm sorry? Google?
He's right, man.
Google it.
Yeah.
Google it. Google it. I Google stuff.
He said the book of Enoch.
I didn't understand.
He said the book of Enoch.
Enoch. Yeah, there's a first and second Enoch
But not in our everyday.
that is not in our Bible.
Okay.
The book of Enoch is a very, very good book. It's first and second Enoch. And if you go to Africa, they use that as part of their Bible.
Okay.
They do. It is a pseudepigraphic book, which means that there is some false stuff maybe in it. Okay, and so that's why they call it that. But it's more good stuff in there than the little other stuff. because everything that's in there it has scripture references. Okay, so when you come to the book of, I'm waiting for, what is his name? He's searching.
Here. Man of the dark.
Man of the dark. Okay, so that's what Google says. Okay, and you know something about Google? Google's wrong. And that's what most dictionaries have. Most dictionaries have. You own it. I like you. Even if your dad's from North Carolina. But the book of Enoch, it says about Methuselah that it will not happen.
Right, and tell
It will not
I
happen.
did say that.
Yeah, it will not happen. So what will not happen?
The flood.
The flood will not happen until he dies.
I'm taking your spot
Right.
back.
And then the moment he died, then the rain started falling. And when it started falling, it didn't go drip, drip, drip. It just bust open. And then there were earthquakes. God created the first tsunami. The whole earth was rocking. And water was just coming down forceful for 40 days and for 40 nights. Now the ark is a floating vessel. That's why the dimensions is the way it is. It wasn't made for moving around and, just for floating. And it landed where God wanted to land, on Mount Ararat. So when it landed on Mount Ararat, then God opened the door and the animals walked out.
On dry land like we did in the Red Sea.
I can hear you.
I said on dry land, just like it was when
Yeah.
God parted the Red
On
Sea.
dry land. Now something was different now. So all the animals are out, but now, because of sin, something has changed. In 40 days and 40 nights,
There was no one else.
there was no one else. That's good. Observation. There was no one else. But something else happened.
They stopped it alone. The animals were at peace on the ark. But when they got out into the open, that's when the roaring started about. The lions started roaring. And
Okay.
they started fighting.
Well,
It couldn't be alone no more.
wow.
Right.
5 animals. Okay. But something else happened.
They had to feel for themselves.
Something else happened.
Is she guessing or what?
What happened was, remember, the Bible is precise. It is so superfluous that everything is important.
Right.
He lived 969 years. Noah lived, I think it was 800 something years. And then after that, life started getting
Shorter and shorter.
decreasing, shorter and shorter and shorter. The dinosaurs were out there. Something in the atmosphere changed.
It started being heat.
It wasn't pure anymore.
Started eating.
The oxygen wasn't pure anymore. And so man's lifespan began to get shorter and shorter and shorter. The atmosphere was different. The lights and everything was different. Everything was different. And everything started dying out. And that's what happened with the dinosaurs. Because they were vegetarians. And now what they were eating is not there anymore. Now, something else that's going on here with these animals and with these dinosaurs, even with man. He survives, but he's become more evil. And get back with her. And when everything started to die, the whole earth was full with sin, and things got worse and worse and worse. Let me show what I'm talking about. I had talked about that with you. Okay? The dinosaurs have died out now, man has started to die, and now man is starting to want to be better than God and want to be more than God. So man is trying to reach up to a God, because they didn't want God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He didn't want them to be their God anymore. So they said, we don't need you, God. So we're going to build us a tower. So the Tower of Babel was built. They created it for their God to come down in this one little room that was at the top. Whole bunch of steps.
Instead of them going up to their God.
So God said this, since they are doing, I'm paraphrasing, they want a God, he says, let us, plural, Elohim, let us go down and confuse their language. So God comes down, since they wanted a God to come down, he comes down and he says their language was confused, which is why it's called the Tower of Babel. And we learned Sunday, if you were listening to the sermon, that the word Babel means just talking, not making any sense about it, talking about the latest stuff and just stupid stuff that's going on. So God comes down and confuses their language. Now, that God that they created wanted him to come down to that tower where there was only a small room so that God can eat and go to bed. And then when that God got done, the steps was not made for them to go up there. It was made for the God to come down to them. So that's why God said, we're going to go down and we're going to confuse their language. And then after that, things start getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to look more at these dinosaurs, because I got a few more things that I want to share with you. We probably won't have any videos. It's from my notes that I lost. I apologize. I hope the film was good. Okay. I hope it helped you out a little bit. But we're going to look at it a little bit deeper on tomorrow night with these dinosaurs. They all lived together. They lived with Job, because Job talks about a behemoth, okay, which was a very large animal. Talks about the Leviathan. Okay, so there was the Bible. Another thing that I want to talk about tomorrow night. What about dragons?
We'll talk about that tomorrow night too? We're going to talk about dragons tomorrow night
Yeah.
too?
Dragons. What about dragons? Were there any dragons? What about a unicorn? Is the word unicorn found in the Bible?
Probably not.
Google it. That's the question. Or is a unicorn found in the Bible? What about unicorns? Myths or real?
UFOs. What about UFOs?
We talk about dinosaurs. You go to short buses.
Get out of that word.
I can't do my work. He's busy with me all the time. But what about dragons and what about unicorns? Did they actually live?
No.
Dragons, did they actually live?
Fire-breathing dragons.
Who says yes?
No.
Who says no?
I say no.
I say no.
Who says I don't know?
There's no creature that was in Revelation when we did Revelation. And they walked around with the heads and the horns and praising God and stuff. But did they have stuff similar to a unicorn?
We'll find out tomorrow.
I had to do some more
Bring that back to the table. Okay, okay. But we're gonna look at that. Because when you look at a dragon, does it look like a dinosaur?
Yeah, I think
Did
they're
did it breathe fire?
all that.
No.
Dinosaurs didn't breathe fire.
Dragons, I think.
I don't
I
know.
don't believe it.
I don't think.
We're gonna find out tomorrow night
Unicorns ain't-
whether it's true or false.
Lions, tigers.
Okay,
bears.
so the unicorn,
No.
a rhinoceros has a horn.
It's okay,
Deer have antlers.
And there's a narwhal.
A what?
It's called a narwhal.
but normal-
And it's a, looks like a dolphin with a horn.
Okay.
What's it called, Hank?
Narwhal.
No wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we want to find out, did God create these things? Or did they just come up and,
And also, Dr. McKin, you know, if you look at the ocean, how big the ocean, how deep it is, you know, there's stuff in there that don't come up. You know, there's creatures in there that hasn't been discovered yet.
right?
You know, man don't know about some of that stuff down there.
That's
Because
right.
it's so far down. And, you know, our technology only allows us to go so far.
True.
You know, we can't go to the depths, you know, because we don't have technology.
Would there be any dinosaurs living today?
Some of our neighbors could be dinosaurs.
No, the devil lives in man.
Could it?
I don't know.
Could dinosaurs be around today?
No,
What did you Google? Did you find it?
No, because we need to put them on the grill.
That's just like
We need to grill that bad
mermaids.
A mermaid?
That's like mermaids.
Okay.
That's like
A mermaid?
mermaid.
Mermaid.
Mythical.
Okay.
The sailors said it was
No.
The mind is
They
tricky.
say the-
What did you say?
mermaids.
The sailors?
Yeah.
Really?
Ships way back in 18-something.
They were too busy drinking then, that's why they
They say it exists.
Inquiry minds want to know.
Yeah.
What'd you find? Can I read that? Or would you like to read it? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let me get you the microphone.
It's not good.
And give us your scriptural reference.
Isaiah.
In Isaiah 34, verse 7, it says, "And the unicorns shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness."
Will you read that again,
Yes.
please?
Isaiah 34, verse 7, it says, "And the unicorns shall come down with them, and the bullocks and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness."
So unicorns in the Bible.
Man, good job,
But
bro.
that don't mean they're real.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're real.
We're going to find out tomorrow. You want me to tell you now, but I'm not going to.
Come on.
I know you all.
The next verse, verse 8 says, "For it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion."
Pastor,
They're real. It says,
in the NIV version, it's totally different. It says, "And the wild oxen will fall with them, the bull calves and the great bulls. Their land will be drenched with blood, and the dust will be soaked with fat."
Didn't say nothing about no,
No, they changed
unicorn.
it up, but that was the King James version that he was reading.
Okay, so we got two different versions. We have the New International Version, we have the King James Version. The King James Version says unicorn, and then the NIV says oxen.
Oxen, yes.
So which one is right?
Oxen.
King James. I like King James.
King James?
Yeah. I'm a King James.
Well, the answer to that question is
We gotta go back to the Hebrew language to find out what it says. Go on, we gotta go back across that personalized.
Okay, so
752.
So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back across the bridge.
Personalized bridge.
Okay, we're gonna go across the bridge, across that principalized bridge and understand what they understood at that time.
Homework.
And we're gonna find out if the King James is correct.
Homework.
Or if the NIV is incorrect. Or if
They both are correct.
or if they both are correct.
Are they both wrong?
Or they're both wrong. Okay? But one way we will find out tomorrow about a unicorn.
All right.
Fact or fiction? I appreciate your help. You've been a great help. You know what you did? HBO. You know what that means? Help a brother out. You helped a brother out. Appreciate you. So tomorrow, I'm gathering my notes. We're going to do a lot of talking, a lot of discussing. I'm going to go to the scriptures and see what the scriptures say about a lot of things, about these dinosaurs. I can't wait until tomorrow. And again, I apologize for not finding my notes. I don't know what happened to them. But anyway, I'll give it back if I can stay on till 12 o'clock tonight. All right? Amen? Okay, Pastor, you want to talk anything or say anything, sir?
I just look at those first three words up there. Bara Elohim, Bara Bereshit Elohim. In beginning God.
In beginning God.
Oh, my God.
And again, if you cannot believe, up to here, then you can't believe the rest of the Bible.
And the uniqueness of that is in beginning God, three words. And that word God, as Dr. Smith shared with you all yesterday, it's plurality of God. So when you look at that, how God actually put that together, in beginning, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is three, which was the third word of the beginning, which makes it so much better when you start listening to what God is saying, that you can start believing by faith what He has done.
You can't believe that. You can't believe the Bible. You can't believe that. You can't believe Jesus Christ.
The rest of the way.
Appreciate it. Okay. You gonna be home later tonight or you be at work?
Yeah, no, I'll be home.
Okay. All right. Text me your address again.
I will.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. We're gonna have fun tomorrow. So you be here. Be here. Or you don't be here, you'll never be able to get it back.
Got everybody signed in?
Yes, sir. Everybody signed in. And you will receive certificates. Everyone will receive a certificate. I'm just making one copy, and Dr. Nicholson, I'm going to need, I'll just put your name in there. I'll scribble your name in there, okay? All right? So, if there's nothing else, are there any questions? Concerns?
We're just glad our guests came.
Amen.
Yes, thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for your presence tonight. You're a man after my own heart.
Good go.
Better believe that.
There's bragging on him over there too.
Oh, I just love people, especially young people that go to the Word.
Well, that participate.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah. And remember this. Remember this. You might cause trouble when you to school if you go and you say, the earth is not 6 million years old. You say, the Bible says it's 6,000 years old. I'm sorry.
Praise the Lord.
He go to Christian school, won't have that problem.
Oh,
That's all they know.
you are a man after my own heart. Great, great. What Christian school is he going?
Well, he's going to go to Heritage. He's going to go to Heritage. North Carolina, that's all he went to.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's good school.
So, did you all move here or you just visiting right now?
She kidnapped me right here. We moved here in April.
Oh, you've been here that long? Okay. Well, wake up in Kansas. And I'd like to take you to a football game, a KU football game.
Don't do it.
No.
You'll be highly disappointed.
No.
You'll be highly disappointed.
Who's your school?
That's what she went to school at.
The University of who?
You like that, don't you, Pastor? You like that, don't you?
I like North Carolina better than I like Kentucky.
You take the Fort Campbell? You got Fort Campbell?
Say one more time.
You take the Fort Campbell?
No, I said that was at Fort Knox.
Fort Knox,
Fort
okay.
Knox High School.
University of Kentucky. And North Carolina, and Oklahoma, and K-State.
You, baby.
In Highland Park.
Definitely Highland Park.
Yes.
Tennessee ball.
It's time to shut it down now.
Okay, we won't have the benediction tonight, we will have it tomorrow night. okay?
I won't wear my gift.
We will have,
We haven't got it
on
called yet.
on Saturday at 10 o'clock, we're having a
Cookout.
picnic
Oh,
cookout.
pizza out.
Yeah,
Where's
cookout.
your wife?
Pizza out.
Okay, all that,
Where's your wife? Deacon Moore?
okay.
Downstairs.
Okay,
Where your
You're
wife?
dismissed.
She pulling our tickets.
okay.
Yeah, she's gone.
You got your tickets?
I don't know. She didn't do the raffle? Yeah, she did earlier.
Oh, no, for the kids.
For the kids.
Oh, I thought she did the dog raffle.
Oh, look here.
No.
I thank God for you. And if there were more young men like you, young boys like you, grow up to be, you're a godly boy, young boy, and you're gonna grow up to be a godly young man, and you're gonna be a godly man. And I love that. Thank you, parents. Yeah.
Thank you for letting your
And-
girl next door.
And it's so mannerable.
Yes, she is.
Yes.